record on this. So everybody answer okay. So welcome to our first in our series of our founding fathers. We got Daniela presenting tonight. Yay, look at her all dressed up.
And I'm pretending like I'm drinking Madeira because that's what Washington and Jefferson drank. However, I couldn't drink it. It's like port. I used it to cook instead. So that's not actually this.
Well, where did you find the uniform?
I looked high and low on the internet for an affordable, authentic reproduction tricorn hat. And the picture was nice of this. And this is like the cheapest yucky rayon. And then the wig was just in the back. So I cut it up and pinned it to be in the front.
That's
That's
awesome.
okay. You're looking good. You're looking good.
That's
And
awesome.
then this is a children's school book on presidents, and I'm hiding my notes in it.
Aw.
So, well, it looks like I'm reading.
That's awesome. Now, you know, you're setting the standard, you're setting the bar,
No.
and we're going to be in serious
Not
trouble
doing it.
because you're going to be the check A+, and we're going to be, I'll be the, maybe the C student than this one.
Well, you haven't heard it yet, so.
Oh, I'm sure it's good. Hey,
But
you
I
get an A+ for effort for sure.
But okay, I'm 290 years old, so I do have to read it because I don't have all my notes memorized.
Yeah.
So tell me when you guys are ready.
I'm ready. Everybody else ready?
You want to mute people, Renee?
Yes, I can do that. I can mute all the participants, and then Daniela, you'll have to unmute yourself. So
Oh, why is it gonna mute me again? Let's see.
No, you're good.
Says I'm not muted.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh, okay, good. Okay, good. All righty, I'm gonna start then. So I don't want to be too general, but this is only gonna take about 15 minutes instead of the full 30. George Washington was born February 22nd, 1732, which was the same year that Georgia became a colony. And I looked that up. He's a Pisces, in case anybody's curious. And fun fact number one is he preferred the pronoun he or him, though I unearthed this picture of him in drag, suggesting he may not have preferred that pronoun. Just saying. Born in modest Westmoreland County in Virginia farmhouse, he was the first child of a middle-aged father and his second wife who had 2 kids. They were neither poor nor rich. At the time, Virginia was a province of the English Empire, and they considered themselves British, even though the British saw the colonists as crude second-class citizens. At 11, his father died and left the bulk of the estate to his older half-brother Lawrence, who became somewhat of a surrogate father to George. Lawrence was educated in England and aristocratic and dignified in nature, which Washington wanted to be too, but ultimately he was only educated till the age of 14. So he studied books on etiquette and Roman classics on his own. His education or financial insecurities were often covered with his aloofness. In his quest to become an aristocrat, he became all about the dollars, which is appropriate since his face is on the dollar. And though he was known for his even temper, notes have been found where he loses that temper when people owe him money. Fun fact number 2, because putting a face on a coin was a symbol of Caesarism and dictatorship, he refused to have his face on money, instead using the face of Lady Liberty. It wasn't until the middle of the next century that his face was used. Oh, and they had him drawn and quartered after he died. He grew into a handsome 6'2" man who many women crushed on as he flaunted his fancy clothing from England. Fun fact number 3, white boy could dance. He also had perfect penmanship and was a great horseman. At 17, he became a Blue Ridge Mountain surveyor and became even more of a rugged frontiersman who knew the landscape but while maintaining his champagne tastes. He'd do things like sleep in the backwoods, and even as president, he was caught boating in a thunderstorm. He then traveled to Barbados with his half-brother Lawrence and got smallpox, which permanently scarred his face, but immunized him and helped him survive the outbreak with his soldiers some 25 years later. By 18, he bought land, which was the most important thing to own back then. At 20, there was a Cold War between England and France over conflicting land claims, and the neighboring Fairfax family appointed him as the officer in the Virginia militia. In 1754, at the age of 21, Washington launched a surprise attack on a small French force at Jumonville Glen in order to demand the French leave the region and stop harassing the English traders. Now, because I'm keeping this short, there's so much I could go into with the different wars, but I'm kind of just giving a very big overview of the wars instead of the details on them. But he ended up surrendering to the French forces, where he was paroled easily instead of executed at the Battle of Fort Necessity, which helped spark the French and Indian War, which was part of the imperial conflict between Great Britain and France, known as the 7-Year War. 10 were killed, and he was deemed inept, but bounced back quickly. By 22, he was already a famous American. He led the Virginia Regiment as nonpartisan. With no skills of his own, he was tasked with training civilians. He learned how by reading and simply improvising. He never was considered a great thinker or strategist. His skills were always leadership and never-ending determination. He was known to instigate trouble, but always escape it somehow, as if he were charmed. He idolized the British, modeled his men after their soldiers, and won a British commission, but they rejected him at 24, so he resigned and realized he had to advance as a non-British civilian. This was courageous because if he failed, he could have been hung. But of course, by age 42, we all know that he became the British's archenemy. In 1752, Lawrence, who had married into the rich, dignified Fairfax family, died and left Mount Vernon, its farms, and hundreds of slaves or indentured servants to Washington. Washington had fallen in love with the already married, witty, and charming Sally Fairfax, whom had been grooming him since they first met when he was 16 and she was 18. She was first tier and he was second tier wealth. And Sally, along with Lawrence, was a big part of who instilled his desire to learn aristocratic ways. Still in love with Sally, but with that dollar being such a big deal to him, he met the wealthiest widow in Virginia, 27-year-old Martha Custis, with 2 kids, 17 acres of tobacco, and hundreds of slaves. He proposed to her in 22 hours and married her in 15 days. She was a kind, likable, social, and supportive person who helped injured soldiers immensely and would slip them money. A plump and petite matriarch to all, he switched his farms to mostly wheat and sourced everything locally. He made enough to get out of debt, and this was his realization that America could be economically and politically independent. By 1775, he owned 6,500 acres and led a luxurious life, which included fox hunting, spinning, weaving, horse breeding, and yeah, his favorite animal was the buck. The joke. He joined the Virginia House of Burgesses, which was the first democratically elected legislative body in the British American colonies. It was led by male landowners. He was sent as representative at the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. By the second, after much uprising, he showed up in his uniform, and Adams appointed him the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army in a unanimous election of 1775 at age 23. Is that right? I think so. After which the famous Braddock's defeat took place, where 4 bullets went through his cloak and 2 horses were shot out from under him. Yes, he again escaped unhurt. This helped him with his kind of James Bond action figure status, where he can always triumph harm easily. Seeing himself as a simple citizen soldier, he was known as fearless and upfront in battle, and the only one who would not die for cover. Bravery had made up for skills in battles, and he was now a hero at 24. During the following 8.5-year War of Independence, the troops were suffering terribly, and those rumors of barefoot, bloody footsteps in the snow are true. So Washington would beg Congress for supplies, but they just suggest that he commandeer them, but he would never do something so dishonorable. He also offered slaves their freedom in return for service. He knew slavery was wrong and took steps to free them, but in his will stated not until after his wife had passed. After the war, he did things like not sell slaves without their consent, not separate their families and let them grow their own crops, and left slaves in Philadelphia, which had a law that they would become free after a certain time period. It was a discreet act of emancipation. Not because of Washington's skills, as much as the fact that Washington would never give up, or go away, a war of attrition. The British surrendered in 1781 at the Siege of Yorktown. And even though the surrendering of the honorary sword owned by Cornwallis was handed to Washington, his modesty refused to accept it, and he ordered the Englishman to surrender the sword to his General Lincoln instead. It was the Treaty of Paris in 1783 that endorsed British support of the independence of the US, and after subsequent battles that year, the British were forced to evacuate, and Washington then disbanded his army and resigned as commander-in-chief. Where did Washington keep his armies, you may ask? Well, in his sleeveys. In 1787, he was a unanimous choice by the delegates to preside over the Constitutional Convention. He was the president of the assembly, yet he seldom spoke. Now, this was the number one thing I wanted to learn while researching, is what was his contribution to the Constitution? And pretty much none. He just sat there and was cool, and everybody was like, oh, wow, he has command presence, and they were well behaved and inspired by him just being there. As a Federalist, he approved of the Constitution, identified flaws, and praised the amendment provisions. Originally not wanting to attend the convention, he instilled obedience and reverence in people, so his quiet presence ended up providing a sense of focus and direction for others. That's all I could find, and I just looked and looked, and everybody had a glorious way of saying he did nothing. Pressed to be president where he didn't want to be, and pressed to accept a $25,000 salary per year when he wanted to be a pure public servant, he was unanimously elected in 1789 at age 57 by the First Electoral College. At what is now Wall Street in New York, he swore his oath to protect the newly ratified Constitution while seeming grave about the awareness of what he was embarking on. Filled with self-doubt, he'd write that he felt like he was going to his execution with an ocean of difficulties, but he'd try his best. He was not interested in the rise of partisanship and commanded respect from all sides. He managed to be non-divisive, which varies greatly from anyone after him. It was a time of modesty, a time where people used pen names because the message was more important than the person writing it. He maintained this modesty with his confidence as a leader, and would commonly say or write things like, I am not competent as your president, or I am not competent as a general. He felt America had a calling and was destined for greatness at a time that optimism was low. His vision of a young country growing was not an obvious vision to others. It was a time where each state was like its own country, a time when Jefferson said, my country, that meant Virginia. But Washington's vision was to cohere them as a nation. It was just Washington and Benjamin Franklin that had this big picture of the destiny of America at the time, at the cost of the Native American Indians and the slaves. Because he was so not confused on his appearance, we already covered that. Because he was so focused on his appearance, he doted heavily on how he presented himself during presidential tours and hosting foreign diplomats at his Philadelphia home. He'd do things like get out of his wagon before entering a town, hop on a white horse to greet all the adoring people, and then get back on his wagon. He'd study trends in France and try to figure out the balance of what a kingly decor and dinner to impress foreign diplomats would look like, while still being toned down and starting things off right was setting the precedent for an American president and not being a king. Fun facts number 4, it was this balance of being simple and democratic, yet powerful, that inspired the obelisk design of the Washington Monument in DC. Fun fact number 5, he hated big introductions of his arrival at parties and would arrive early and lean on the fireplace mantle casually before people arrived. He hated being watched, but he knew he had to be a figure upon a stage. As president, not to be called king, he established the working form of the executive branch and appointed a cabinet that was nonpartisan instead upon merit. Doesn't that sound nice? Which no president has been able to do since. He's also the only president to not have blamed the previous president for all of our problems. In 1796, his farewell address, partially assembled by Hamilton, was published in the papers, where he condemned the bipartisan catfighting, relinquished presidency after 2 terms, solidifying America's democracy, and warned against debt alliances with foreign powers. Quote, Europe's interests were not America's. In his retirement at Mount Vernon, he embraced his solitude and died at age 67 on December 14, 1799. After a typical 5-hour horseback ride through rain, he fell ill with pneumonia the next day and died the following. He asked that his funeral not be a spectacle. First in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of our countrymen, was his eulogy, and Napoleon ordered 10 days of mourning in France. Not so fun fact number 6. His last words were, "'Tis well." I would like to say, dear humble father of our nation, on behalf of our constitutionalist group, we sure hope that those words ring louder than the Liberty Bell, and all will be well indeed with our beautiful country that you gave us. You were self-taught and learned from your mistakes, as shall we. So yeah, in conclusion, he chopped down a cherry tree, false, and he had wooden teeth, also false. They're actually hippopotamus ivory. And yeah, he was either like the 2nd or 5th president. I don't know, no biggie. Anyways, the end.
That was great.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Wonderful job.
Hey.
So interesting. I learned a lot. I'm trying to remember like the thing that I thought was most surprising. I don't know.
So he was a celebrity.
Yes,
Yeah.
a modest celebrity.
He was a celebrity.
But he didn't
And
want
he was also a capitalist before
Yeah.
we even knew what that was.
Yeah, but he was a celebrity by like his modesty and just being dignified. He wasn't a celebrity like today where they're, posting their TikTok videos and like me.
Right.
He like earned it just upon merit, like how he appointed his cabinet.
Well, it sounds like he had a presence when, you know what I mean? People have it that people talk about when somebody walks into a room, they're like,
Mhm.
oh, he's got it or she's got it.
Or
It
you
sounds
go,
like that's
"Ooh,
what
who's
he
that?"
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't think of a better father for our country. Like
Mhm.
he was just so, I know he had slaves and that's an issue, but within the means that he was working with, he was like secretly trying to like free them, even though he could have just freed them. Like, I don't know. There's always the problem with slavery, but he knew it was wrong at least, and aside from that, I just felt like he was kind of magical. Like that's what Pisces are like to me sometimes. It's like somebody sprinkled fairy dust on them. He was just, yeah, he was a cool, he's like, okay, you know what he makes me think of? How like you would dream a perfect grandfather would be solid and trustworthy and honest and probably a little silent, but what they said was probably with a lot of integrity. Like you would think that was like the ideal perfect father figure or grandfather. That's who he really was.
Yep.
He's the perfect father.
Yep.
He was a man of his time as far as his sins of slavery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Way
Gotta
ahead
take
of
it in
his time.
context.
Yeah, he was way ahead of his time with his insight and the way he did things, like not wanting to be king, to step down with that modesty and not do more than 2 terms as president, because they would have elected him until the day he died.
Oh.
Yeah.
One thing I always found interesting about that time frame is the way they did it up until that point. The vice presidency was whoever finished second. So I'm
Mhm.
curious with the Electoral College being unanimous, if that was the case for him. 'Cause I know after him, like I think Adams was the second president. Well, Jefferson was behind him. So Jefferson was his vice president, and they were on the opposite end of the political spectrum. So they butted heads a lot. So it wasn't until I think a few years later they felt like this is a bad idea. We shouldn't we shouldn't do that.
Mhm.
Could you imagine Donald Trump being Joe Biden's vice president right now?
Well, no, because then they would get assassinated so that the next one in line could,
Right. Yeah,
come
so
on.
I'm curious if you saw anything on that because I don't know.
No, I didn't, but like I know we were given a half hour, but I like could have written twice as much, but I figured, especially Jim was going to be in the group, I knew the attention span would be like 1 minute. So I was like, I better keep it short as possible and skim over a lot of the details. Like I didn't talk anything about like his father or anything like that either.
No,
And
but
he-
what you presented was really interesting. I mean, it was to me, it was a good overview of him as a person plus as a leader,
Yeah, that was one of my goals. Like I listened to this one podcast, I listened to a bunch of podcasts on him to get these things, but one was like, if you were to go on a date with him, what would it be like? One of them was about, and they were just describing like his dancing and his aloofness, but how the girls were swooning on him, and I just liked hearing the human side of him.
Mhm.
So I was trying to capture a little bit of that. Well,
Yeah,
anyways.
I think that's what I found most interesting. I think that he was more. I knew he was modest, but I didn't. It came across more in your presentation. So, hi, Blue.
That Blue's right here.
Oh, was that your
My-
kitty? Your cat?
Yeah,
over
well,
there.
I just realized my cat has gone fully deaf. He's 20. And
Oh.
I read that they meow louder when they're deaf, and he meows so loud now.
Aw,
I know. Well, thanks for the
Oh.
support, guys. I'm glad you
Well,
liked it.
thank you so much
Yeah,
for
it was
giving such an
great.
awesome presentation. You look
Aw. Thank you.
One thing I thought was really funny, honestly, and I didn't realize he was sworn in on Wall Street. And then
Yeah.
that was interesting. But then because you said that after you mentioned he would get pissed off if people didn't pay him, I'm like the connection between like the capitalistic side and him being sworn in on Wall Street, just like it blew my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
That is funny. Awesome. What was your favorite fact about him?
I guess I liked the fact that he was such an outdoorsman, because I knew that he liked to dance and dress up and be fancy, but I didn't realize that he would sleep in the woods and boat in thunderstorms. And, he just like that ruggedness that he had. He wasn't a dandy, he
Gotcha.
could do both. I really liked that.
It's like James Bond.
Yes. Yeah. He just always liked
Suave, debonair, but
Yeah.
yet will kick your ass at the same time.
Yeah, I think I got a little crush on him studying him.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
Yay. Well, good job. And
thank you.
we've got someone else up, and are you ready? I think Eric is presenting now.
No, I'm not ready. I forgot about it and I just got too far behind.
Gotcha.
I was going to say I just spent too much time in the red light district research in Franklin, but
Oh, that's
Taking one
Yeah, I
good
just-
team, huh?
yeah.
yeah, that's fine. But
What I found interesting though in starting my research in that, and what Danielle said about Washington is they both wanted to be accepted by the English,
Mhm.
and they strove to be that way, and they ultimately were cast aside
yeah,
because they weren't part of that class. They weren't born in England and part of that class.
yeah.
I thought you were going to say you developed a crush on him.
No.
And to that, like, it was kind of cool how, like, when he switched over to Washington, he started getting everything locally sourced, and he realized, wait, we don't need anything from a foreign land. Like, I got this. Like, America can give us everything we need.
Awesome.
Yep.
That is awesome. Well, I don't know. I think that's probably it then. And if anybody wants to just stick around and hang out, I gotta eat. So I'm gonna put my laptop over here, but we can hang out and just chit chat. But I want to keep your picture post or pinned up here, so because you look awesome. And of course you got it in your patriotic room, so you've got all your flags up, and it looks awesome.
Yeah. Because at the time of Washington, there was obviously 48 stars on the flag.
Yeah, but still, it's awesome. Yeah, man, there's no way that I can even measure up to that.
I know, right? I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh.
Well, I don't know, like, maybe people just not take it seriously then and just have fun,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Google cheesy jokes. That's what I did. I shamelessly threw in the armies and the sleeveys.
That was funny. And I got
Oh, you know
his
what I
favorite
forgot?
animal being the buck.
I totally forgot one though. His teeth, his not wooden teeth, they were his presidentures.
Oh.
You know what? I love those cheesy jokes.
Me too.
I love the dad jokes
Yes.
because they are all like such dumb puns, and I love puns. They're like my favorite, and my
Me too.
kids get annoyed with me. I'm like, come on, they're good, clean jokes. They're funny, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like, if he's the father of our nation, they're probably the jokes he would have told.
Exactly.
Dad jokes.
Exactly. It's awesome. I'm sorry that Jim wasn't able to be here to see it. He's got some other stuff going on. He said he'll be at the next meeting for sure, but this one, it was a bummer to miss. I'll tell him that. That's
Well, I'm excited for everyone else's. And there was some things on the list that I wasn't expecting. I forget. There was what was the last one on the list? It was the Sons of Liberty.
Mhm.
Is that what it was?
Yeah,
excited
for
for that
for
one.
Dan. Yeah, Dan will.
Yeah.
We kind of assigned him that, but we'll see. So
So I was in Ohio today in is it Lima or Lima?
Lima.
Lima.
Lima. Okay. There was a lot more snow there than here. Is a big storm coming to you guys too in a couple days?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
one more day?
Yep.
Yeah, they're saying it's going
Tomorrow
to
night.
start Wednesday night at about 7:00 and go through until Friday. So they're
Okay.
going to get dumped on Thursday. It's going to be all ice and like freezing rain in that at first, and then it's going to turn to snow, and it'll be snow over ice and
Yeah, that's not good.
big snow, like a lot.
Yeah.
They anticipated a lot of snow, so
It's supposed to start here at 5. So I
Really?
recall a meeting we had in the winter last year where it had started snowing here, and then you guys got it like an hour later. So here we're supposed to get it starting at 5. You guys are getting it at 7. But yeah,
if 5 and 7, that means it's a slow moving and it's going to dump a bunch then. So
yeah.
It's the ice that's so bad.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
gonna bring your power lines down.
that's what they said. They anticipate we're going to have some power outages, and they already were talking about canceling schools already ahead of the storm because they knew that it was going to be
Mhm.
a substantial storm
They
this
should do
time.
that. They should go ahead of time because the last time it didn't fucking snow.
That's true. The last time they had the snowmageddon was coming and they canceled school, and then it didn't snow. It like went around us or something. That's pretty funny.
Yeah,
but-
well, better safe than sorry. If y'all want to
Yes.
hop on a plane and come on down to Florida, now would be the time to do that.
Yeah,
Next week,
yeah. Bill just said next week.
They must have got their weather pattern from CNN before.
Yeah. No kidding. No kidding. Oh, I know. I like that. We always joke, and I think everybody probably says it. That's the only job that you can be wrong half the time and still keep,
Yes,
so.
Well, that and
more
baseball.
than half the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
baseball, you're right.
Baseball, that's true. Yeah, that's so funny.
We're actually
So
supposed to get
I
some
have to
snow
ask
on
my
Thursday.
Ohio peeps, how do you feel about the Bengals going to the Super Bowl?
I'm
You
okay
wanna-
with that.
you wanna stop recording?
It's not the Steelers.
Yeah, you want me to stop recording?
Yeah.
If you want,
Okay, I'll stop recording and we'll talk. We'll treat this as our post and,
yeah.
well, thank you, Daniela, for your presentation tonight.
Yes, that was
Wonderful
awesome.
job. And we'll get this posted so that everyone can share in the wonderful knowledge about George. It was great. I loved it. So
Okay.
I
Hey, thank you.
Well done.
stop our recording and we'll see you in a couple weeks, everybody else, but we'll stay on. All right.